What is an appropriate way to deal with the paint on your classic Mercedes? One of our Patreon supporters sent us a question about, the best course of action to take when repainting your Mercedes. And so I thought I'd expand on this question because it's a good question. Now, a lot of the time when we get cars in the shop, they fall into three categories. Cars that have decent original paint, cars that have a low quality or a moderate medium quality paint job, and cars that have an extremely high quality paint job. And you're going to be surprised at what some of the things that I found on cars that have a medium quality paint job versus a high quality paint job end up looking like. So, first of all, I say that you should preserve the original paint on your Mercedes at whatever cost possible. If you have a car that is heavily oxidized, buff that sucker till it shines, even if you have to strip a couple of micrometers of paint off. The next thing that you should consider is if you have to have one panel repainted, don't respray the whole car. Just paint the panel. There's a device called a sun gun that most paint shops have that can analyze your paint for you and actually make it possible for you to repaint one panel. You just need to have a guy that's extremely good and diligent about mixing paint. You can't have somebody who's a total clown about it. I remember years ago we had a 230 come in that needed to have the paint blended, and even though the paint shop was like, "Oh, I wanted to, we can't do this enamel paint." It was Caledonia green. Eventually, I got them to capitulate. They got a 95% paint match. They sprayed it in. It looks so much better than a car where everything has had to be taken apart. Now, the next thing is that we're going to look at our low quality and medium quality paint jobs. Low quality paint jobs are paint jobs that are done for like $1,000. They don't take the trim off the car. They tape everything up as best they can. There are going to be paint lines everywhere. They're probably going to do minimal sanding and surface prep, and there's a chance that the paint could just peel right off the car because not all of the surface was prepared. This kind of paint job is a, how should I put it? It's kind of a travesty. But it's still better than having a car that is, sitting out in the elements rusting. So if you have a bunch of surface rust and you can at least get the surface rust taken care of, that's fine. Now, one thing I will say before considering a paint job like this, look at the parts of the car that need to be painted. Sometimes it's better to paint the roof, the hood, and the trunk than to paint the entire car. I found, as a matter of fact, that cars that have had the roof, hood, and trunk painted, and the sunroof panel, of course, sometimes look pretty good even if you leave the original sides unpainted. And the sides are typically the hardest part to deal with because they have the most attached trim. Now, moderate quality paint jobs are paint jobs where they didn't necessarily strip the whole car or pull the glass out, but the shop really tried to do a decent job. They usually cost between $4,000 and $6,000, and the amount of time and energy expended into the vehicle is usually equivalent to what you would find when you buy any used car at an auction or whatever. What you're looking for in a moderate quality paint job is paint that was done over Bondo, over rust, over body damage that wasn't fixed properly, a car that wasn't blocked out properly, or cracking paint, paint that has runs, paint with too much moisture in it. You really want to look at the painter's work to see how good it is. Now, there are other work to see just how good their work is, or if they're just looking for a few $1,000s and they're going to do a half-assed job. Now, one of the problems that we continuously run into with cars that are painted at high-end shops is sometimes for high-end money you get a moderate quality paint job or worse. What am I saying? I'm saying that just because you pay 10 or 15 grand to have your car painted doesn't mean you're going to get a great result. Sometimes stripping the car down to bare metal sounds like it's most of the work, but the real determining factor is whether they can take that bare metal body and actually put a really great paint job on it. We've seen cars. There was a shop in Fort Lauderdale that was doing extremely high-end paint jobs, but they were not dehumidifying the paint properly and putting enough hardener in, and the paint was peeling off like latex after a few months. And you know, when you pay a shop $20,000 or $30,000 to do that kind of work on something like a Jaguar, or you pay them 15 grand to do it on something like a 280 SL, what do? You know, it's simply not fair to pay so much money and get a terrible result. So I always say, look at the work of the painter and then make sure that they have like a reasonable schedule for you and stuff. Now, one of the other problems with high quality paint jobs is trim reattachment after you're done. If you have a shop that's painting a bunch of different cars, you can't be 100% certain that the person who's painting the car is going to put all the trim on right. You have to go through and check the trim and make sure it's actually seated properly, because one of the money-saving secrets a lot of these shops use is they reuse as many old clips as they can, and then they use aftermarket fasteners or whatever they can get to work to get the car's paint, get the trim to stick to the car. We had a shop that didn't want to actually replace a piece of rusty metal on a 300 SD from Pennsylvania. So instead of welding a piece of metal in between the rear door and the rear wheel well, they just filled it in with Bondo, painted it, and glued the trim piece back on. Ridiculous. Anyway, I think the message here is pretty clear. Vet the paint shop you use beforehand, and try to figure out what level you want your car painted to beforehand. I just wouldn't go for an extremely cheap paint job unless it's like really an emergency and you have to do something to preserve the car. In this case, the car should be viewed as a preservative. Now, on a side note, the paint should be viewed as a preservative more than something to really accentuate the beauty of the car. But I'm not saying paint it flat black either. Now, on a side note, I'm sure some of you are wondering what I think about wraps. Wraps are crap. You use wraps for advertising purposes. You use wraps to accentuate graphics on your car, but wraps are not a substitute for paint. And you'll put so much work into cutting and wrapping the car that it's probably better just to get it painted. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video and found it to be informative and useful. Please like, share, and subscribe, and please tap the bell for notifications. And if you have your own negative or positive experiences getting your Mercedes painted, or if you have a great paint shop that you recommend, please let us know in the comments. In the meantime, thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. And if you have a question and you're a Patreon supporter that you want answered in a video, please email Thomas or myself and let us know. Thank you so much, and enjoy working on your Mercedes Benz.